Welcome back, everyone. As we continue our deep dive into Nāgārjuna's Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, we're making a major pivot today. We've already established the dialectic of emptiness and karma in our previous sessions, so now we are jumping straight into the critical ontological core of Chapter 18. This is where Nāgārjuna rigorously unpacks the very concept of the individual self, the Atma, and its absolute negation, anatma. We're going to analyze this directly in relation to the 5 aggregates, or skandhas, and really look at the cognitive roots of possessiveness, those deeply ingrained notions of I and mine that eventually snowball into phenomenal extension, or prapañca. We're going to walk through an exhaustive 11-step Madhyamaka reasoning process to demonstrate why neither self nor no self actually exists inherently.
Here is our roadmap for Chapter 18. 1. The karma production triad. 2. Applying the tetralemma. 3. Emptiness and interdependent co-origination. 4. The illusory union. 5. Transcending the generalized tetralemma. And finally, 6. Abiding in suchness.
All right, let's start with Section 1, the karma production triad, where we establish the conventional constructs.
Step 1 of our reasoning requires us to clearly define the 3 spheres of karma production. We have to delineate the actor, the owner, the acquirer, or the self. Then we have the action itself, the ownership, the act of acquiring, and third, the result, the possession, the acquired, or the 5 aggregates. From this basic triad, our conditioned cognition immediately starts building these incredibly rigid conceptual frameworks. We create these fundamental dyads and triads. We falsely set up a self in direct opposition to no self. We set up me in opposition to mine. And this cognitive splitting doesn't just stay local. It scales all the way up to massive cosmic dualities. We get existence opposed to non-existence, eternalism opposed to nihilism, and ultimately, we construct saṃsāra in absolute opposition to nirvāṇa.
Moving right along to Section 2, applying the tetralemma. This is truly the crucible of Madhyamaka logic.
For Step 2, we take the tetralemma and systematically dismantle those constructs we just talked about. We take those 3 spheres, the owner, the acquiring, and the possessions, and we relentlessly test them against every single ontological extreme. We show that they cannot be existent, non-existent, both, or neither. They cannot be different, identical, both, or neither. We have to scrutinize whether they are separate, united, both, or neither. Are they multiple, one, both, or neither? Dual, non-dual, both, or neither? Permanent, impermanent, both, or neither? We even check continuous, discontinuous, eternal, annihilated, you name it. We can even just say this, non-this, both, or neither, for whatever this happens to be defined as. And when we rigorously test these permutations, like say examining if the self and the aggregates are continuous or discontinuous, what we find is that every single extreme position inevitably forces a logical contradiction. The whole reasoning just collapses into absolute absurdity.
Let's look at the exact mechanism of this collapse, straight from the text. In verse 1, Nāgārjuna says, if the self were identical to the aggregates, it would have a rising and ceasing. If it were different from the aggregates, it would not have the characteristics of the aggregates. Think about that. If the Atma is completely identical to the skandhas, well then it's subject to continuous generation and destruction, which completely ruins any eternalist concept of a self. But if it's entirely distinct from the skandhas, then it has no recognizable characteristics at all and literally cannot interact with phenomenal reality. By logically proving the self cannot be found as identical to or different from the aggregates, the entire foundation of possessiveness, the I and mine, completely caves in. This effectively severs the very root of prapañca, that endless conceptual proliferation.
And this naturally brings us to our Step 3 conclusion. These 3 spheres, the owner, the acquiring, and the possessions, are completely undeniably empty of inherent existence. Because they are empty, they are never absolute. And since they lack any absolute nature, we have to conclude that there is absolutely zero real opposition or relation between opposites. In fact, there are no real opposites whatsoever.
So, Section 3, emptiness and interdependent co-origination. Let's start rebuilding our understanding.
Having torn it down, Nāgārjuna sets up the framework for conventional reality brilliantly in verse 10. He writes, whatever comes into being dependent on another is not identical to that thing, nor is it different from it. Therefore, it is neither non-existent in time nor permanent. This is huge. Dependent origination is the precise mechanism that allows phenomena to actually function because they lack inherent existence.
Arising dependently stops them from being these absolute eternal entities, but their causal functionality also stops them from falling into absolute non-existence or nihilism. Building directly on that for step 4, we established that the three spheres, owner, ownership, and acquired, are entirely inseparable. Because they are empty, they are dependently co-originated. They are strictly interdependent. They co-define each other, they are co-emergent, and they are co-evolving. But crucially, they are entirely co-imputed by the mind. The self and the aggregates definitely function, but they function strictly as mere designations, functional names, and conventional truths or tools.
Which leads us nicely into section 4, the illusory union, the union of two truths.
For step 5, we have to recognize the union of the two truths regarding these three spheres. On a conventional level, the owner, the acquiring, and the possessions are relatively useful conventions, but ultimately, they are never absolute. What's really fascinating here is that this union of the two truths regarding the spheres is the exact meaning of the union of opposites. Their conventional functionality and their ultimate emptiness aren't contradicting each other at all. They are actually mutually defining.
To conclude this specific phase of analysis in step 6, we recognize that these three spheres operate exactly like illusions, reflections, mirages, dreams, or echoes. Phenomenologically speaking, they are there yet not there. They appear and they function perfectly according to dependent origination, but the moment you subject them to ultimate analysis, they dissolve entirely.
Let's elevate this in section 5, transcending the generalized tetralemma, moving well beyond dualistic models.
In step 7, we employ the generalized tetralemma to definitively affirm that the true nature of these three spheres is not this, it is not non-this, it's not both, and it is not neither. And there isn't some hidden fifth option either, regardless of whatever this happens to be. Their true nature resides entirely beyond all conditioned, dualistic conceptual proliferation. It is fundamentally, completely beyond all of our models, our triads, and our dyads.
Now, knowing this, we really have to properly contextualize statements like verse 8, which says, "Everything is real and is not real, both real and not real, neither real nor not real." This is Lord Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's application of these extreme positions was highly pedagogical. It was a deployment of skillful means meant to break very specific patterns of prapañca in his listeners. He wasn't trying to establish a definitive ontology. These statements are conceptual medicines. They are absolutely not absolute truths.
So, step 9 dictates that our highest epistemological stance toward all phenomena is the middle way. We must remain entirely free from all extremes, this or non-this, and equally free from the middle positions of both or neither. We have to rigorously avoid and continuously dismantle philosophical extremes. That means rejecting objectivism and realism, subjectivism, idealism, solipsism and nihilism, relationism and processism, dualism and pluralism, and yes, even monism or radical oneness.
Finally, we reach section 6, abiding in suchness, the real culmination of chapter 18.
All of this intense philosophical deconstruction demands a very practical synthesis for our step 10 inquiry. If the self, the ownership, and the aggregates are just empty, dependently originated phenomena, how are we supposed to interact with phenomenal reality without immediately falling right back into the cognitive trap of reification?
The resolution is quite elegant. We use the spheres conventionally and relatively. We use them as the very useful tools they are, but we never use them in absolute terms. We utilize these concepts without attachment, without reification, without immense efforts, and strictly without absolutes. And we do all of this while maintaining an intimate, continuous awareness of their true, completely empty nature.
Which brings us to our ultimate conclusion in step 11. Recognizing that absolutely all phenomena lack inherent existence, we might as well perceive everything as primordially equal, pure, perfect, complete, divine, and one. Keeping in mind, of course, that one here sits entirely beyond the tetralemma of many, one, both, or neither. By doing this, we abide in reality exactly as it is. We abide in its profound suchness.
Through this exhaustive analysis, we reveal something incredible. Emptiness itself is absolute freedom. By completely severing the root of conceptual proliferation right at the level of the Atma and the skandhas, the mind simply ceases to fabricate the boundaries that sustain samsāra.
We have subjected the very foundation of identity to the most exhaustive Madhyamaka dialectics possible today, so I want to leave you with this final, rather provocative inquiry to carry into your own contemplation. If there is absolutely zero continuity or discontinuity of any being across the past, present, or future, who exactly is it that is realizing this suchness? Think about it. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive explainer. Catch you next time.